About Miss Euan, would you care to comment on how you met her?
Well, Mike, I went with you one day to the nursing home where she was living, which was the one off close to Casa View, the Jewish home, and she confirmed what she had told you before regarding what she had seen. She had witnessed events pertaining to the Tippit murder just shortly after the murder. She didn't see the murder herself, but probably 10 seconds later, she did go to her window and saw what was happening. Can you relate that briefly?
Yes, sir. And Professor Pulte and I, one occasion, Bill met Miss Pulte with me, and then we talked to her on the phone together a couple of times.
Correct.
Miss Doris Euan was living at 411 East 10th Street on the left, which has been on the left side if you're going east. She lived upstairs. She worked at the Marriott Hotel at night in Dallas. And she had gotten off that morning at about 7. She said sometime if she didn't get a ride with one of her co-workers, she'd ride the bus home. But if she was real tired, she'd get her a cab. And she worked in the cafeteria and did the night. Back then they had night, what they call home cleaning, and they'd keep one person there all 24 hours around the clock, prepare for the accident if they needed a room cleaned or something. So she did that, and she also worked in the kitchen in the daytime sometimes, and early in the morning. So anyway, she got home, she said about 7:30. She, used the restroom, what have you, stuff like that. And she laid down. She called her sister. She said at about 9:45, and she laid down, and she told her sister, she was going to get her some sleep. Well, she said probably she'd been asleep about 2.5 hours. And she said, you know how you wake up sometime in the middle of your sleep? She was a smoker. So she got up and she went to use the restroom. And she come back to the bed. She said it had to have been around. Once she thought, she looked at the clock, it was 1:12, 1:14, somewhere in that neighborhood. And her cigarettes was laying there. She reached over and lit the cigarette ashtray, and she took a couple of puffs. She said all of a sudden she heard this pow, 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 pow. And I asked her, I said, Miss Euan, you sure it was 4 shots? She said, Big Mike. She called me Big Mike. She said, yes. She said it was definitely 4 shots. She said I was sitting on the bed in my pajamas. And she said it startled her. She dropped her cigarette. She reached down and picked the cigarette up and put it in an ashtray. She got up and she ran from the back bedroom. She lived in the upstairs apartment. The bedroom's in the back. And there was like a middle room in the kitchen, a little kitchen and dining room together, and a little hallway, the bathroom, and then the living room. So she ran from the back to the living room and through the curtain back and looked out the window. And she could see this officer, Dallas police officer, laying in the street, saw a squad car, and she said on the sidewalk was a man. She said he had a gun in his hand. He had on a white jacket, black pants, kind of receding, balding hairline. And as she threw the curtain back, she said, I guess the motion of the curtain, because he was facing her, he looked up and saw her in the window. And she looked at him. I asked her, I said, Miss Euan, I said, when you looked him in the face, I said, and he looked at you? She said, yes. She said, I said, do you think from the distance where you were looking down and he was looking up, could you have identified him? She said, well, I've always said it like this. She said, the man that I saw later that evening on TV and in the interviews and when the Ruby shot him, she said if it wasn't him, it was his twin brother. She said, but on the day of, she said, if they would have asked me, could I identify him? She said, I would have had to say no. She said, because I don't think I could make a positive identification. She said, but it most definitely, to a 90% probability, was that man that I saw on TV later. She said same height, and she noticed that his hair was kind of out of place, and she said then a strange thing happened. She said, as I was watching this man, she said this man came up the driveway in a dark blue jacket. She said he was about the same height as this man in the white jacket, but much heavier. Mm-hmm. She said he weighed well over 200 pounds. She said, I also saw this squad car. She said, I could see on the left side, the cherry, what they call the cherry on top. And she said it was a Dallas police car. She said it pulled halfway up the driveway and stopped. And she said the man in the blue jacket kind of went in a little fast walked out in the middle of the street and stood over the officer. She said he had nothing in his hands. He looked down at the officer, and then he turned to the man in the white jacket and began to do this, like telling him to leave, get out of there. She said, and then that's when the man in the white jacket turned to his left and proceeded toward Patton. She said, I watched him until because the end of the house is here, so she could only see him so far. She said, I watched him as he went out of sight. She said, and then the man in the dark blue jacket, she said, started back down the driveway, and she said, I could see the police car backing up. The police car never came all the way up the driveway. Mm-hmm. She said it backed up. She saw the front of it. So she ran back to her bedroom and threw on some, she like what we call women's sweat. She had a pajama bottom on, but she said she had some black sweat pants, and she had a top laying there on a chair, and she grabbed her glasses and slipped on some shoes, and she ran down the steps and ran out to the street. And of course, at that point, Helen Markham and Mr. Frank Cimino, who lived next door, heard the shots just as Miss Land. He came out of the side door on the west side of his house, and he ran to the front of the house. He saw this officer laying there. He too saw the man, but he told me, now I enter the name. Mr. Cimino told me, he said, I knew the man. He said his name was Max Ceylon, and he lived in the next block. And he said he thought by the time he got out there, he thought that Max Long, like everybody else, had just seen it, and he didn't think nothing about him being involved in it. He thought Max Long had just seen it and had run up to the officer. He said because the man in the white jacket was just going around the curve, he stopped momentarily. He said he looked toward the woman over on the corner. He said, I could see the cab driver bent down by the cab, Mr. Scoggin. He said, and then the two girls on the corner house had run out. He said one of them had a baby in her hand, the Davis girls. That's what Mr. Cimino told me. And he said he thought Max Long was just scared because Miss Markham has not run to Tippit yet. As she said, she said she put her hands to her face, you see, and she said I was looking through my hands, and she was screaming at that point in time, and she said he looked at her. Mr. Scoggins confirmed that. And then as he continued his flight, Mr. Scoggins said he heard Oswald say, poor damn cop or poor dumb cop, something to that reference. The Davis girls said they looked at him right in the face, and they also said that at this point, the Davis girl and Mr. Scoggins too, that they saw the youngest girl, Barbara. She was the one that was holding the baby. She said he had the gun. She said, and I saw a little round. She said it looked like a ball. Of course, that's the great discrepancy about what kind of gun killed Tippit. And she said, and so I asked her when I talked to her that one time. I said, was it long like this, or would it have been like this? And she said, like that. She said it was flapped out from the gun. She said it was to the side of it, and he was jiggling with the gun. This is what Barbara Davis told me. And she said it was a little round ball looking. Of course, we're talking about a cylinder. And I said, did you see the gun? She said, yes. She said, it wasn't a big gun. She said, it looked like a small gun. Mr. Scoggins, who was very familiar with guns, he saw it and he told me it. Another thing real quickly I want to add to this. Bill Scoggins told me this one time. As you know, he was a cab driver. He was in his cab that day. He had just dropped a fare off. He came to the Gentleman's Club and was sitting in his cab eating his lunch when Officer Tippit was shot. Well, Mr. Scoggins told me, he said, Mike, he said, he said, man, when it happened, he said, I didn't even think about it. He said, I jumped out of my cab. He said, oh, and what he said was, he said, oh, he said to himself, or how you'll talk when something happened, he said, that son of a bitch shot that policeman. That's what he said. And he got real nervous. He jumped out of the cab and he started to run, but he realized, he's like, hey, somebody's got a gun. So he come back and he just stood there by the cab for a minute. Then he bent down by the left fender. But what he said he forgot, or it didn't enter his mind, Mr. Scoggins had a .38 snub-nosed revolver in his glove box of his cab. He was a cab driver and he often worked at night, and he had a pistol. And he said he didn't even think about, and being a World War II veteran, I asked him, I said, Mr. Scoggins, I said that. He said, yeah, I know. He said, but I didn't. He said, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. He said, this guy was shooting this policeman. And he also told me, he said, when the officer passed in front of him, he recognized he had seen Officer Tippit many times at Austin Barbecue and in the neighborhood. Mr. Scoggins himself lived in Oak Cliff on Alaska. I went to his house. I can get my cousin Don Wayne Brigham, my former partner that I used to bounty hunt with, Johnny Santos, and another very dear friend of mine, Clark Kirkland, who's still living. They were all three there with me when I talked to Mr. Scoggins in 1972 at the corner of 10th and Patton. And Mr. Scoggins' daughter, his oldest daughter, and I think she still lives she may just recently moved with her and her back down to East Texas, but I think she's still in the Dallas area. She was there the day that I also, and I can definitely confirm that I talked to Bill Scoggins 2 different times. His daughter was there both times. And so many times, Bill, Brother Steve, something you say, Bill, that's very true. I would also I want to mention a name that I don't think he will, and I'm just going to mention his name, a man that Bill and I both know. Now, Bill knows him much better, and I've met him maybe 5 times. I've talked to Steve or told Steve about him, and many people know him. Mr. Greg Lowry, one of the true Dallas researchers in the Kennedy assassination, and of course a man that's been gone for a little while. He knew Penn Jones, Mr. Penn Jones, who also lived in the Dallas area. And you're talking 4 people, Penn Jones and Greg Lowry, Professor William Pulte, and myself, who in the Dallas scenario, we talked to more witnesses than anybody, any of the great researchers. Now, Robert Groden, again, this Mr. Groden's book, The Case for Conspiracy, it proves beyond any shadow of a doubt the medical pictures in Robert's book. Ladies and gentlemen, this is ABC. That's the back of President Kennedy's head. That's an exit wound. And Mr. Groden, Robert Groden, is certainly one of the top 3 great researchers in the Kennedy assassination. I give him all his due for the work he's done. He was the first man ever to show the entire Zapruder film on national TV. 1975, he went on the Geraldo Rivera show with Dick Gregory, and no one had ever shown the entire film till Robert showed it in 75, and his work is well respected in the Kennedy research world, and he's truly. And then of course another great researcher, the man who I think wrote the first great book and one of the 3 greatest books ever written a man that I've known a long time, talked to him many times, met him, Mr. Josiah Thompson, who lives out in California still today. And, of course, in 1967, he released a book called 6 Seconds in Dallas. And that book, Mr. Thompson left it open to let you go to either side, both sides, but he presented the evidence in the greatest way I think it's ever been presented. And what a fabulous book it was, February 67, 6 Seconds in Dallas. That book was phenomenal. Mark Lane, Rush to Judgment, another great book. And so you're talking about the great researchers. But in the Dallas scene of meeting people, and some of them I met years later, but some of them I met in the early years, I was able to talk to many, many, many witnesses, some of the doctors at Parkland, down through the years. And Brother Steve, I was going to ask you, do you think, Steve, that when Oswald was shot, when Tippit was shot, do you think that it was the imposter, or do you think it could have been Oswald?
To this day, I can't decide.
You just been undecided on it?
Yeah. I just, if they looked alike, and these people hadn't seen them before.
Yes, sir. Certainly. That's a great day. Yeah. You might be looking at the imposter.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very possible.
And that complicates so much of the research, because you can't just say Oswald. You have to say, was it the
imposter,
actual Oswald, or was it the imposter? And that complicates everything.
That's why I was saying a while ago. Let me clear this up. I was just saying, if the real Lee Harvey Oswald shot J.D. Tippit, and let me say this too, another thing that I think we'll all three agree on and know, as many other, I know it, J.D. Tippit, Jack Ruby, and Lee Harvey Oswald, all three knew each other. And I believe that Tippit knew the real Oswald as well as the imposter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did he know him enough to know if the man he approached at 10th and Patton that day, when Tippit was killed, could he tell the difference? Well, some stories have surfaced lately that it's and now I'll go into this. Since this just came up, let me say this. Somewhere a minute after Officer Tippit was shot, or 1 minute before Officer Tippit was shot, in that 60 seconds, at the corner of 10th and Marsalis, 2.5 blocks away, you have a man that has been stabbed, violently stabbed. Mr. Cecil Smith, Bill and I talked to him together. Mr. Tom, a guy named Tom Black, he worked for Crown Plumbing, he saw it. Miss Harriet, the woman who owned Crown Plumbing, Mr. Siegel, they were all there. They ran, and the people at the auto place where Domingo Benavides was supposedly going to get the part, but it turned around, and so if he'd kept going, he would have seen that. He often talked about that, but he did turn around in the driveway to go back to get the part number for the carburetor lease, and I believe that might be a legitimate story because he told me that. But these people saw this man get stabbed. Miss Helan's son was coming up the street, and he was on a bicycle, and as he fast as he could pump, and he got up to the scene, he saw his mother standing out there, and he saw the policeman, and she told him, Miss Helan said she told her son, he was I think he was 17 at the time, or 16, and he wasn't as old as Jimmy Burt, but he knew Jimmy Bertham. He knew Helen Markham's son, Jimmy Markham. They all knew each other. And she told her son, she said, baby, somebody shot this policeman. Well, he looked at his mom, and he said, Mom, he said, well, I see what's happening here. He said, down at the corner, he said, a man just got stabbed. He said, God, there's blood everywhere down there. He said, they threw the man in back of a blue Mercury or a Lincoln and took off with him. Well, when Tippit was shot, right as he was shot, the first officer to arrive at the scene was Officer Kenneth Croy. And he ran up to the scene, and naturally being a policeman, now he was a reserve Dallas police sergeant. Now Tippit's been shot. Miss Land and them have come out. So now here comes another police officer from the east, one Harry Olson. And Harry Olson has told me his story himself. He jumps out of his squad car, and him and Croy are working the scene. They said you can hear the ambulance because the used funeral home was right around the corner, but instead of them making a left on Patton and coming up, they went down to Denver and came up and then come back. This woman in a yellow Volkswagen pulls up, a young Mexican lady. She jumps out of a car and runs up behind Officer Olson, taps him on the shoulder. And she says, "Sir," she said, I see what you got here. And she said, "But there's a man down on the corner." She said, "A woman and 3 guys just stabbed him. They jumped on him." And Officer Croy told me this, and Harry Olson admitted it. He said he turned to the woman and he said, "Look," he said, "we just had the President of the United States shot downtown about an hour ago." He said, "You see, we got a fellow officer here." He said, "I don't give a damn about a son of a bitch getting stabbed." But Croy looked at Olson and said, "Hey man, you better go check it out. Could be connected to this." So when Croy said that to Olson, Olson jumped in his car, backed up, and went toward 10th and Marsalis. When he gets there, the car is gone, as Jimmy Land said. And people ran over to the car and told him, said, "Man, they took off north." It was a blue Mercury, a Monterey. And he, instead of him going north toward where they said the car went, he went south. Which
Mike, you said that you had spoken to Officer Olson
Yes.
about this.
Oh, yeah.
Did he tell you that he did see the blood, although the car had already pulled away?
saw the blood. He said that quite a bit of blood, and he said there's no doubt something had happened.
Well, I'm curious, did Olson indicate that that he thought it might be related to the Tippit murder?
Yes. And I asked him, I said, "Also, Olson," I said, "did you pick Lee Harvey Oswald up at the rooming house?" And he hesitated. He said, "Well, a lot of people followed orders that day." And I've told you that before. That's what he said. He said a lot of people followed orders that day. He said Oswald was following orders. When he said that, then I knew exactly what he meant. And Officer Hargis had summed it up years in his thoughts of it, and many other officers. Another question. Was Lee Harvey Oswald, and if he didn't shoot Officer Tippit, and the only reason he would have shot him, if the real Lee Harvey Oswald, who come out of Marguerite Oswald wound in 1939, if he shot Officer Tippit, the only reason he would have shot him is because Tippit was finna kill him, and he shot him in self-defense. He shot Tippit actually in self-defense. Or did the man impersonating Oswald shoot Officer Tippit?
I think you said that the man was walking, and when he saw the policeman, he tried to make a U-turn to walk away.
And I left that out. I'm
So
glad.
he's avoiding the policeman, but the policeman won't leave him alone.
The policeman won't leave him alone. I'm glad Brother Steve brought that up. Steve and I have talked about that. And some of the witnesses, as you know, said that Mr. Scoggins and Miss Lori said, yes, the man did do a about face and started back east. And the Phillips girl said that Tippit tooted the horn. And then Oswald turned and they could see him becking for him. This is on 10th Street, not at the rooming house, right just before the shooting. And Oswald walks up to the right side of the squad car and bends down. The Phillips girls, the other two girls, the Phillips, not the Davis, and Domingo said that Oswald had his, and Miss Laurie said had his hand in his pocket, in his jacket. And as he bent down, the very short conversation. Then when Tippit got out of the car, as he was getting out, the man in the white jacket backed up to the sidewalk. So it's just really hard to determine if Oswald, I say that I think Oswald could have done it on that merit only if he figured out that Tippit was going to kill him or thought he was. And you also must remember this: Tippit did not know that Oswald, and the other reason I give a little merit, would the imposter know to go to the rooming house and get a pistol? Why would the imposter go to the rooming house? That's my problem. He wouldn't have no reason to go. I could see him going to the theater, the imposter, but I couldn't see, and the rooming house incident definitely happened. I could not see that, and that's another reason I believe that the real Lee Harvey Oswald, who was living at 1026 Beckley, went to his rooming house and got his gun. He panicked and was scared, and now that he has a gun, he feels protection. And he's got a protection. Mr. Pulte, I know you've got to go.
Mike, I have one last thought or question. Someone in the neighborhood who I talked to years ago told me that he had heard that the person who shot Tippit just briefly ducked up the driveway, but it didn't help. Tippit stopped anyway, then he came back down to the sidewalk. Did you ever hear that?
There were two men who were bricking a house at the corner of two houses from the corner of Denver and 10th.
Right.
Eddie Kinsey, Kinsey, was one of them. The other guy was Floyd. They said when they looked up, heard the shot, and they looked up. But just before, Mr. Kinsey said he saw the man in the white jacket stop, and he looked toward one of the houses to his left, as if to start up the sidewalk. But he didn't, because he started walking back toward them, which confirmed what Brother Steve was saying a while ago, and the other witnesses, that the man turned from walking west and started walking back east. But
and that is probably what that other person was thinking about when he said to me that he had heard that he ducked up the driveway. It actually wasn't into the driveway.
It was a sidewalk. Yeah, the sidewalk one. Yeah, he was changing direction.
Well, yes, I do have to be going to another meeting, but let me...
Before Bill leaves also, I'd like to confirm that he can confirm this, because a man named Mac Pate told him, right after Tippit was shot, a young lady who had worked at the Dean's food store around the corner, her name was Julie. I've had several different last names. I hadn't been able to confirm. I don't know if Bill's ever, and of course I've told Steve this story several times, but I did confirm from several people who saw her, Miss Laurie most definitely, as she got just about even with Scoggins' cab. She come on out in the middle of the street, she looked down and saw Officer Tippit. She had heard the shots, because she would have been about halfway to Scoggins' cab, even a little closer. So when she heard the shot, she ran on up to the corner. She looked down the street and saw the officer, and they said, "You think Helen Markham was screaming?" They said this child just went berserk. She was very young, and she took off just flying down Patton going north. And Mac Pate, who had the barber shop down there, and some of the patrons saw her, and he ran out and I think and even stopped her, didn't he?
Yes, and Mr. Darnell, one of the barbers, went out and tried to console her.
Yes, and they said she was just screaming, "That guy shot the policeman! He's running!" And Miss Laurie said she heard her. That's what she definitely said.
And Mike, I believe that Mr. Darnell was related to Linda Darnell.
Yes, the great actress.
I believe, yeah, correct.
Who was born in Dallas, London, and she born in 1933, died in 65.
The way he described it, she was this young lady, whose name was Julie, was extremely hysterical.
Yes, most definitely, extremely. Another man that Brother Steve and you, Brother Bill, and I have all encountered, once all three of us together. Then Steve and I went, I think, twice, and then you and I went twice, who's still living, who was a very big part of this, is a guy named Warren Reynolds. And of course, in the time he said, "Oh, I'm not Warren Reynolds. He's not around. He's not here." But we all knew it was him. He won't. But he's still living and still in the car lot business till this very day. But February the 20th, in fact, it was the very day before Eddie Benavides was killed, Domingo Benavides' brother. Warren Reynolds was shot in the head and almost killed himself. But he had witnessed the flight of the gunman leaving the scene. And when he got to 10th and when he got to Patton and Jefferson, he said the man made a right, still had the gun in his hand, and he thought he went between the two big houses.
And I can add one piece of information. McPate told me, because he knew Warren Reynolds very, very well.
Yes.
They used to have coffee together. McPate told me that Reynolds said it was absolutely impossible for me to know whether it was Oswald or not.
Yeah.
I wasn't close enough.
He couldn't tell.
But I want to continue living. I'm going to say that it was Oswald.
Because on the day of, he positively said he could not identify the man.
That's right.
He gave a description, what he looked like. But when they asked Mr. Reynolds, I believe it was either Detective Caldwell or L.D. Montgomery. One of the two went out and they interviewed him. Several detectives were involved. And they asked him, they said, "Mr. Reynolds, could you positively make an identification of the man you saw running down 10th Street and then west on Jefferson with a gun in his hand?" He told him, he said, "No, sir." He said, "I cannot." He said he was about 5'10", 5'9", 5'10", 150 to 160 pounds, had on a white jacket, black pants. He said, looked like kind of bald. He said, but no. He said, if I had to tell you, yes, that's him. He said, no, sir, I couldn't do it. Then 3 weeks later, all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, he said, oh yeah, that's the man. That's Lee Harvey Oswald. That's who I saw. But on the day of, he said no. Just like Howard Brennan. Let me bring that up too. Howard Brennan, who was sitting across on the wall from the book depository, he said he looked up and saw this man with a rifle. Maybe he did do that. And they asked Mr. Brennan, who would have been in a great position, probably one of the greatest positions. And they asked him, they said, Mr. Brennan, could you identify the man? He said, no, sir, there's no way. He said, I could not see his face entirely. He said, appeared he had a receding hairline, a white male, had on a white T-shirt. He said, but I saw the gun and saw him aim for his last shot. He said, but no, sir. He said, I cannot identify, I could not identify the man if I had to identify him. He said, I could not make a positive identification. Well, 2 weeks after the assassination, Mr. Brennan said, oh, yes, sir, the man that Jack Ruby shot, I saw him on, that is definitely the man who was shooting from the window. So he lied, and I told him to his face. I met him, and I told him, I said, Mr. Brennan, you said you couldn't identify the man on the day of the assassination. And I also like to say another witness who said he saw shots from the window. I recently learned in the last 2 weeks, and he's been sick for some time, but he's pretty sick. Amos Euan, the little black boy, he was 15 years old. Steve and I made contact with him one time, but he wouldn't talk with us. But then 2 weeks later, I went by myself, and out in the yard. He wouldn't let me in the house, and I only talked to him for about 5 minutes. And he told me what the day Steve and I went, he came to the door, but he wouldn't talk to us. He would not talk to us. So then about a week later, I was trying to find Miss Chisholm, and amazingly, Amos Euan and Miss Chisholm live about 1.5 miles apart. So I went back by, and he came to the door again, and he came out this time, though I was by myself, and he came out, and I told him who I was, and so he talked to me for about Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, today is July the 6th, 2015. I'm in Dallas, Texas, and Brother Steve and Bill and I have done this documentary. The Kennedy assassination changed America. Lord knows, Officer Hargis, I miss him. I think about him every day. You couldn't have been much closer other than Miss Kennedy sitting right next to him. Officer Hargis was the closest witness to the president. He was splattered with that blood, and Officer Hargis took it to his grave with him. Regardless to what Miss Hargis or anybody else says, he took it. Now, he told his mother, Miss Edna, and she took it to her grave what Officer Hargis told her, because I'm the only somebody she would talk with it about. And I miss Officer Hargis. He met some mistreating in his late part of life. And but I know he's up in heaven now, and I think about all my family, my grandmother, my grandfathers, my mother, and my two brothers, Neil and Robert Allen, and all the people that I grew up around that time when President Kennedy was killed, and Brother Bruce Wynn and Brother Don Cherry and Carl Canada and people that I were very close. They all shared my sentiments in the fact that it was a conspiracy, and they didn't believe Oswald shot the president either. Lord knows I think about Miss Jeffy May Spencer every day. Brother Steve and Bill knew Miss Jeffy. She was a most grand lady and walked in the Spirit of God every day. And my pastor, Reverend Ralph Gossett, and again, like Miss Pulte, people that we all miss and cherished and loved. And in their spirit, I came here to do this documentary today to try to give the most truthful insight that I feel is true, that a lot of people are going to agree with and a lot of people are not. People have ridiculed me and called me all kind of lies. I want to say this in ending. On November the 22nd, 1963, my grandmother, Miss Vivian Neal, was here visiting from Amarillo, Texas, my hometown. And my grandmother and my aunt, Miss Hattie Mae Williams, my aunt, Miss Jeffy Mae Spencer, Miss Lila Bradley, Miss Annie Mae Smith, Miss Sarah Carter, we all caught the bus that morning on Elmore Street. We caught the 23 Shorehaven going back downtown. Coming out it was the 38 Lisbon West, but going back was the 23 Shorehaven. And we caught the bus and went down to see President Kennedy that morning. Getting off up at Akron and Manila, we wasn't even going to Dealey Plaza. We were going to walk over to Main Street, as many people did. A lot of people who had just seen President Kennedy in Fort Worth jumped in their cars and made the short 31-mile trip from Fort Worth to Dallas. People that came from all the surrounding little suburb cities, Garland, Mesquite, Duncanville, Irving, Grand Prairie, Euless, Bedford. People had come from everywhere to see the president. I think it's estimated, I know in Robert Groden's new book, oh God, there's a picture. You can see it all the way down, 200-some thousand people on Main Street. And we came down, so living in Dallas, I remember Miss Annie Mae Smith, she said this. Miss Johnny B. Brigham was with us. And Miss Smith, she's the one that said, she said, if we walk down to the plaza, we always called it the plaza, Dealey Plaza. People would say the plaza. She said, if we walk down to the plaza, she said, there probably won't be as many people. She said, because she said, they're either going to go under the bridge on Main or Am, one of them down there. She said, and that's going to be the end. She said, there may not be as many people down there. What made her think of that to this day, I don't know. But sure enough, as we entered Dealey Plaza, we walked down Commerce, the new jail, which is now the George Allen Government Center, and it was under construction. And as we got to the plaza, sure enough, she was right. There wasn't as many people, maybe 500-600 people. And that was the end of the motorcade route once the limousine went under the triple underpass. So, yeah, she was right. So we got a good spot, and we were there. And it doesn't matter how close you were, how far away, people that were in Dealey Plaza were there. Many of them told their stories, different ones certainly. I know Josiah Thompson's book, 6 Seconds in Dallas, has what's called master list of assassination witnesses, and he got a lot of them. Not all of them. There are people that have never been interviewed that are still living, and there's late 60s, 70s, 80s even, that were there. There are people who were there who chose not to talk about it. I know a lady, and she was there, and she has a picture like Mary Mormon. She took one Polaroid picture of the president's car as they were turning off of Main on to Houston. That's the only, so she didn't take anything toward the grassy knoll. She took a picture of the presidents as they were turning off of Main onto Houston Street for that one short block. And she still has that picture today. She did work at the courthouse. She worked for a judge. But she never came forward. She said, Mike, I wasn't going to get involved in that. She said, I know the last shot come over there by that fence. She said, I saw that puff of smoke. She said, shit. She said, I don't even think that boy fired any shots. She said, I think they set him up. She said, but if Oswald was fired, and let me say this too, ladies and gentlemen, many Dallas police officers, then and now, all say this. If Lee Harvey Oswald was firing, and he wasn't, what I'm saying is, he certainly wasn't firing by himself. This is a picture of Mr. Johnny Calvin Brewer, the man who saw Oswald going to the theater and alerted the police, along with Julia Postal. That's a picture of me and Marie Tippit. Of course, that's Officer Tippit's widow. And I have some pictures here from the limousine at Parkland. And picture with me and Miss Myrna Zapruder, Abraham Zapruder's daughter. And this is Nurse Patricia Hall at the 7th floor of the museum today, saying that it was an exit wound. She was in the hospital. This is me and the current chief of police in Dallas, David Brown, at the memorial for Officer Tippit's. Brother Steve and I attended that. And a famous picture of the great lady Shari Angel and Jack Ruby. Shari Angel was one of Jack Ruby's most better dancers, or burlesque dancers, as you must say. And this is a picture of me and Officer Robert Rowe. Officer Robert Rowe was one of the arresting officers in the theater. He was there. He passed the handcuffs over to Bob Carroll then when they handcuffed Oswald. So I brought just showing just some pictures that I have to prove and show people of all the years that myself and Bill and Steve have done work on the Kennedy assassination. So it was a mass conspiracy, ladies and gentlemen. It did not happen. Another thing I want to show real quickly before, and I want Steve to get this. This picture was taken the day of the assassination, later that evening, and that's that big oak tree up there on the corner, in front of the Texas School Book Depository at the corner of Houston and Elm. And you can see that tree was the same size in '63 it is now, and it definitely was blocking the window at the time the shots hit President Kennedy in the throat. So the first shot, as the Warren Commission, it did not come from the rear, it came from the front. And Dr. Malcolm Perry, on the day of the assassination, one of the first doctor, he was the first doctor who saw the president. That's Dr. Perry right there on the day of the assassination, and there's his statement. He says there was an entrance wound below the Adam's apple, and many of the doctors there shared that with him. Brother Steve and Brother Bill, I've enjoyed doing this documentary with you. Brother Bill, I know you've got to go see about her, and I hope you find her well and things are better. And Steve and Bill and I, as long as we keep breathing God's air, and He's the master of all things, God Almighty, I know I'm going to continue the fight in this, and hopefully someday before we die, the truth will come out. Bill's in his starting mid-70s now. I'm in my 60s. Brother Steve's in his 60s, and many other people, but we're still living. Got some health problems, but hopefully before we die, the solid truth may come out. Steve, I thank you, sir, for coming and doing the interview with me as always. We've always we've worked together now for some 13, 14 years on the case, talking to different people, Steve and I. Steve's been a friend, he's been a brother, he's been a family. For many times, I don't know if I would be living if it wasn't for Brother Steve, and I say that in monetary senses and support and as a friend. And then, of course, Brother Bill and Miss Pulte, years of helping me, and I've had some pretty serious health problems. Many people have, but some people have more than others. And, Bill's wife, Miss Pulte, I remember just 2 years ago, she's had some health problems in the last few years. Bill certainly knows that. But 2 years ago, Miss Pulte was still driving. We were talking about that just the other day. She was up and walking, and I was just saying that just to show you, you never know. We think her heart probably give out, but 2 years ago you wouldn't have thought that, because she was still driving. I talked to her many times on the phone and in person, and so you never know. You just never know. So I'm glad we were able to do this, and we are going to put this on YouTube. This is my project. My name is Michael Brownlow. Mr. Allred and Mr. Pulte are here supporting me today, and we've all made some comments on it. But if anybody has any flack about it, 214-257-5155. That's my phone number. My name is Michael Brownlow, and you can call me, and I'll definitely talk to you about it either way you want to go with it. And I thank you again, Brother Steve and Brother Bill, and we're going to end this documentary now.
You're welcome, Mike.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 12 to 15 years, myself and Bill and Steve could attest to some of it as witnesses. I have been ridiculed, and if he wants to sue me for this, I hope he sees it, because I'm damn sure going to say it. And it has nothing to do with Mr. Allred or Mr. Pulte. Michael Brownlow is saying it. Gary Mack, the curator of the 6th floor museum, he and we do not like each other. And I personally think he's prejudiced as hell. He doesn't like black people. He pretends to, because he has to work around them. And then another thing is he for some 22, 23 years that I know of, he said that it was a conspiracy and that Oswald did not shoot President Kennedy. I heard him say it several times. Mr. Gary Mack, whose real name is Larry Dunkel, he had a radio show here in Dallas many years. Bill and I seen I believe it was called Night Flight. Is that correct, Bill? Night Live, Night Flight.
That was one called Sidetrack.
Sidetrack, yes.
Sidetrack,
He also was on KFJZ Radio, and then he worked with KXAS TV. He's been in the area a long time. He chose to hate me for whatever reasons, and a lot of lies have been told, ladies and gentlemen, about me and jumping on people in the grassy knoll. I've had several fights on the grassy knoll, probably over 30, 35. And never started one of them. I don't start fights with people, but you can believe this, in the spirit of my mother's womb, to God Almighty and also Argus, if you jump on me, I'm going to fight you. You may whoop me today, but you're going to have to whoop me tomorrow. And in the spirit of my dear friend, I like to say one other thing too, ladies and gentlemen. Steve, Bill, and myself, our phones have been tapped. We've been followed. I've been threatened. People shot at me July the 4th, 2006, blew my windows out of my car. I've had numerous people jump on me at my post office. Went over to a friend of mine's house one day, got out, people tried to run over me. All documented. I call the police every time. And been harassed by some police, Bill got me out of jail, him and Miss Pulte. My ex-girlfriend and I have a documentary with Miss Jeffrey Spencer talking about Danelle and her part in this, and I don't give a damn I hope she sees it. I interviewed Miss Spencer before she died. Me and Steve I have the interview.
10 minutes.
And so I want to say I think because President Kennedy died, he died in vain, and a lot of people are involved in this for monetary reasons, money, wanting to be famous, and we just simply are doing it for the cause of history and for the cause of the truth, to come out and let people know what really happened. And I don't think at all that we'll ever get to the limit of where some of these people are on the sixth floor, and nothing like. I'm not trying to, but I just want to tell the truth of what really happened. And there's some stories about the picture that I'm in, and when need be, or if somebody asks me, I'll tell them what really happened. But I definitely, again, I want to specifically let you know, I damn sure was in Dealey Plaza when President Kennedy was killed, and due to prejudice and racism of the picture, about the picture of the person that was involved in the picture, that's the story of that, and I'll leave that at that, but if I can go further with it later on if need be. And if I will say, if you noticed over the years, Bill can attest to this, I think Steve might have met him one time. That was one guy, Robert Johnson, who was a researcher in the Kennedy assassination. But other than Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Johnson, he's been dead now about 8 years, other than Robert Johnson, I'm the only black man that gets involved in this.
And that's correct.
And I really think they were scared. I know Miss Chisholm told Steve and I on the phone, she said, "Baby, I'm scared." They finally did get her down to the museum because they made her tell their side. So that's what that was. I don't think she'd went down there otherwise. And they paid her. But it was a conspiracy, ladies and gentlemen. Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot John Kennedy. He was nowhere near the sixth floor one day. He may have been involved in knowing the plotting of it. He knew Jack Ruby. He might have known it was going to happen. I don't know if he carried the rifle. They said he carried the rifle. Some people say it was curtain rod. I don't know. But he was not in that window shooting November 22nd, 1963. Lee Harvey Oswald didn't shoot President Kennedy, and I think a while ago we just left the area open of the Tippit thing. So I just wanted to add that, Brother Steve. Thank you, sir.